Okay, recordings have started. Welcome to the Transforming Assessment series for the 1st of May 2024. Today's session is joint with the Assessment and Higher Education Network based in the UK, and the topic is generative AI in assessment, institution and program tactics, and we will have a couple of speakers that preview the Assessment and Higher Education Network conference. James, would you like to introduce that section, please?
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us evening, possibly in some parts of the world, and bright and early in the UK. So we are talking on behalf of the AHE conference, and I'm James Wood, and my co-host is Fabio Orecco from the University of East Anglia. I'm from the University of Bangor, and we are on the executive committee of the AHE network, which is an independent network focused on developing research-informed practice. The executive committee is based at the University of Canberra at the LED Research Centre, and we research a full range of disciplines related to assessment, evaluation, feedback, and so on and so forth. And we have a wonderful conference every year hosted in Manchester. And this year we've got keynotes from Elaine Eaton, Juso Nieminen, who is in the audience today. And we've got masterclasses from Fabio Orecco, David Bood, David Carlos, Jen MacArthur, myself, and we've got sessions from Philip Dawson, Sally Brown, Kay Samble. Many of the people you read in the field of assessment will be there presenting or attending. It's a wonderful conference, so we really hope to see you there. So today, we have a little bit of a preview for the session. So some speakers that will be at the conference as well. We've got Philip Denton from Liverpool John Moores talking about providing AA guidance through Compass. Did students take the right direction? And we've got Susie Macfarlane, Dennis and Emily Tomlinson, and I think we've got Susie and Emily speaking today on a course-wide approach to developing staff and students' generative AI critical literacy. Sessions will be about 15 minutes with 5 minutes for quick questions, and then there'll be room for plenty of discussion at the end. And if you've got any comments, feel free to put them in the chat as we go along, and possibly somebody will answer you, and we'll also try to get your questions answered at the end of each session. So, yep, I'd like to introduce Phil Denton, our first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So I'm going to talk about some work which has occupied us at Liverpool for the last year or so, and it's all about how we communicate permissions to students about what is permissible and what's not permissible for assessments in the context of artificial intelligence. So I'm going to be using artificial intelligence to refer to generative AI specifically during this presentation. So just going back to last year, and particularly the summer of 2023, we were very much inspired by the work of Jason Lodge and his taxonomy of how we might respond to AI, particularly the notion that in the longer term, we're going to need to embrace AI and ultimately rethink assessment from the bottom up. The Russell Group then on the 4th of July introduced their principles on the use of AI, and that was very much in line with Lodge's taxonomy. Also introduced kind of like an ethical dimension. As higher education educators, we have this responsibility to kind of like ensure students are using these tools responsibly. But more pertinent to this work was guidance produced by Monash University for their staff and students, and the Creative Commons license. And one of the things we liked about it was how the guidance really complemented each other, and it seemed to be one of the most fully formed pieces of guidance work we'd seen. And particularly, the instruction to assessors at Monash was to communicate permissions to students around the use of AI by indicating one of 4 conditions, if you like. And the first one is the most prescriptive, AI at all. Second one is the most permissive. You can use any tool that you like. And then the third and the fourth nuance, perhaps stipulating particular AI tools or particular ways of using those tools. So inspired by that, and also just reflecting on the situation, we did really think that, well, there are some things that haven't changed even against this fluid backdrop. And the first of those is that the definition of cheating is unchanged. So any student who contradicts the published permissions for an assessment might expect an academic misconduct investigation, for example. But we also want to set authentic assessment, ultimately, that fosters deep learning. So I guess one way of interpreting that is we don't want to set artificial assessments which don't reflect the real world and don't prepare our graduates for that real world. And the third fundamental thing is, it immediately spring to mind, but this notion that metaphors can have a profound effect on thinking. And when something new comes along like AI, there is this kind of like tacit desire to create an analogy to help us understand it. And in the literature, you can see people have talked about whether you might compare the introduction of AI to the introduction of calculators. Whereas I think the consensus now is that it's much more fundamental than that. It's perhaps more analogous to the introduction of electricity, given the versatility of AI and the profound opportunities that it can offer. So in respect of who's responsible for AI guidance, it'd be interesting to hear thoughts from colleagues, but a review by Morehouse last year found that it was Centres for Teaching, Learning and Innovation which were primarily responsible for providing guidance on the use of AI, if you like, the teaching enhancement, or the quality enhancement departments, if you like, rather than the quality assurance departments. And I guess that reflects the challenges it presents to us as educators in respect of assessment design. Now, when we were considering how to approach this as a faculty, we kind of made a distinction between guidance around AI adapted assessment design, and that is indeed provided by our teaching enhancement unit. And interestingly, that guidance is referred to as AI considerations. That's its title, which I think displays a degree of caution, and it's something you might be familiar with as well. This notion that you don't want to provide guidance to staff because within a week, given the rapid changes that are occurring. But we separated that from how we communicate assessment permissions to students. It was evident that we weren't going to get a steer, as it were, from the university. So we decided, or we concluded within the faculty, it was important that we were very clear about what was allowed and what wasn't, just so that we didn't have students inadvertently committing academic misconduct. Just to reinforce this notion about metaphors, and I guess sometimes they might be viewed as a little bit superficial perhaps, but they really can change the way we view things. And every so often in your work you come across a study from a different subject area that makes you perhaps reconsider your career choices. And this was one for me. This was from a psychology journal, and it showed how in a newspaper article, when a crime wave was characterized as being a beast, there was much more sentiment around responding to that through enforcement measures, such as increased investment in the police, for example. Whereas when the same newspaper article characterized the crime wave as a virus, then the people who read that article were much more supportive of reform type methods, interventions such as spending on welfare policy. So it's against this backdrop then that we developed our Compass guidance for communicating AI permissions for assessment. So this is student facing. And as you can see, we've adopted the Monash approach, having the 4 different conditions. And conveniently, the first letters of those conditions do align with the four cardinal points on a compass: north, south, east, and west. But deeper than that, I guess what we wanted to convey to students is that for every particular assessment, there is a particular direction. And just as if you're going on a journey, it's very important that you stick to that direction. Otherwise, you will go off track. So I think the metaphor works on as an aid memoir, and students have certainly commented that it's helped them in that respect, but also just this deeper significance that the students appreciate that these particular directions have to be adhered to. In respect of acknowledging AI use, students were advised to include a acknowledgement, and the usage acknowledgement was very much in line with the model developed by Monash, and you can find details on their website. We also introduced a second acknowledgement, which rather clumsily we've called non-use, but we struggled to find a more appropriate term than that. But it's a student explicitly acknowledging that they've not used any AI tools to create any draft or final versions of this work. At the moment, it feels appropriate that we should ask students to do that. I imagine the need for that will fade away over the years. Okay, so a survey has literally just finished in the faculty of students, about 350 students surveyed, and you'll forgive me for just posting screenshots from the survey tool because of the timings, but it's evident that perhaps because this was just a faculty approach, students were aware of this compass guidance, and obviously we were relying on individual staff, program leaders, module leaders within the department to share this approach, and evidently it's had mixed fortunes in that respect. Another aspect of the survey, though, that was interesting was that 2/3 of students indicated that they had used AI in assessment during the preceding year, and of those 2/3 had used ChatGPT, which was very much, if you like, the market leader in respect of AI. The next most popular AI tool was Grammarly, but with 41% usage, but I suspect that's been underreported because it was evident in the free text comments that some students were not clear about whether Grammarly was an AI tool or not. In respect of, was the compass guidance useful in helping students to understand what they were allowed to do, then I guess it's overall positive. Majority of students felt it always helped them. Sometimes about a third of students felt it helped sometimes. I think looking through the free text comments, it's evident there was some remarks regarding the lack of consistency in the communication of this framework. And again, because it isn't a university guidance, it is a faculty-based approach, I think that has hindered it in that respect. There was also comments that whereas it was pushed very heavily at the start of the year, reinforcement subsequent to that was perhaps, but it was acknowledged by students that the model of a compass with its 4 cardinal points was quite easy to remember. So far, we've had no academic misconduct cases in the faculty relating to the use of artificial intelligence, but I am aware of at least one that's bubbling under, and I think we will see where we're at the end of the year, I suppose, at the end of the academic year. Okay, so just to conclude and reflect then on our experiences, I would suggest that the compass model provides a convenient framework. The survey and the free text comments that exactly what an AI is, does it include Grammarly, for example, and how we define AI use might need clearer articulation. There's opportunities from the survey results to look at where compass has been well received and is well known, and I'll be doing that over the next month or so before the Assessment in Higher Education conference, just to see where the best practices were in that respect. Ideally, I would hope that might inform a more this. In respect to students acknowledging how they've used AI, we're now going to move to the Cite Them Right system, which provides guidance for referencing in all different styles, Harvard, etc., and including the acknowledgement of artificial intelligence. The university subscribes to this service, and it makes sense to adopt it across Liverpool John Moores University. And just in respect of one potential future, how things might develop, this is just personal opinion, but perhaps in future the no AI pathway might just be reserved for in-person invigilated summative assessment. You know, I can't imagine, you know, we have in pharmacy objective structural clinical exercises where students undertake consultations with patients and are assessed in that respect. I can't imagine those invigilated summative assessment where students have no AI. Where every AI is permitted, well, that would be basically for any non-invigilated summative assessment, reflecting the fact that as AI becomes ubiquitous within society, we have to provide assessments that reflect that and allow us to use these tools. But in the nuanced pathways, allowing students to use some AI tools or stipulating using AI tools, we might reserve that for formative assessment. And I guess it comes back to this idea of how AI is best characterized. So I don't think it's appropriate to consider the introduction of generative AI as being analogous to the introduction of calculators. You'd never set an assessment, for example, where you said you can use a calculator, but you're not allowed to use the plus button, for example. That just doesn't happen. However, I think it is more appropriate to consider, as some have suggested, that the introduction of AI is more like the introduction of electricity. And certainly in high school, for example, you might practice with direct current, with DC current, to get the underlying principles in place, but you would never undertake experiments with alternating current due to the potential risk, for example. And finally, just that what I've come to realize is that this separation we made to begin with between guidance on AI adapted assessment design and the guidance around how we communicate permissions to students, they're not discrete, because as soon as we introduced the Compass framework, staff replied with ideas and suggestions about how they might implement it within their discipline. So definitely the framework for permissions was inspiring staff to experiment with perhaps new modes of assessment they hadn't considered previously. So there is a little bit of overlap there in respect of those two distinct types of guidance. And that's me. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Philip. So there are some questions in the chat if we've got time, Matthew. So if you have a look.
I've actually been tracking them. Do you want me to go from the top?
Sure. Yeah.
So the first one was from Tim Hunt. Why is this acknowledgement different from referencing of other sources used?
Okay, so we were very much inspired by the Monash guidance, and one of the things it indicated to students is not only should they reference the particular AI that they'd used, which I guess is analogous to stating the particular journal you'd used, but also to indicate the prompt engineering terms that had been inputted to develop those responses. So that was one distinction between traditional referencing and this artificial intelligence referencing. I noticed actually within Cite Them Right, which is the referencing style we're going to introduce in future, it's a lot more streamlined than that. I imagine that's the way it will go eventually. arise around how we reference artificial intelligence, and it will be succinct and concise. At the moment, when you write out your prompt engineering terms, it can become a bit verbose. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. The next question was from Mike. Does the Compass guidance only refer to generative AI or any AI? Question mark.
No, yeah, as an indicator at the start, I was going to use AI in the inclusive sense, well, exclusive sense, just generative AI. I work in a faculty of science, and the assessments that we set to our undergraduates are more likely to be the use of generative AI is probably more likely to be of use at the moment. There are already members of staff experimenting with AI more generally, and it might be that the Compass guidance has to adapt in future to accommodate that expansion in its role.
Okay, great. So Robert Clareso from UOC asks, do you provide any guide for lecturers about which mode, north, south, east and west, is more suitable for specific courses and activities?
No, we don't. And the closest we come to that is in the institutional guidance AI considerations, which provides staff with general guidance about how they might promote assessment, and it includes probably things that you've seen already, this notion of setting assessments which perhaps refer to quite specific parts of theory or specific data sets, if you like, working around the capabilities of AIs. In future though, I think we need a more robust solution, and the university is looking at implementing a platform which you may be familiar called Cadmus. I'll just type its name into the chat just for the elimination of doubt, which provides a platform into which students can create their assessed work, and it's kind of like a light touch proctoring solution, I suppose, and it might have wider applicability across various different assessment types, which is what when it became apparent that AI detection was pretty much a dead end, we were looking for other kind of like solutions which could be applied to a variety of different assessment types, and Cadmus might offer that solution. But no, the answer to the question is staff are invited to use their professional judgment to determine which assessment mode is appropriate.
Okay, thanks, Philip. I think we probably better move on to the next speaker, given time is going to start running out. So if we have more time at the end, there'll be an open Q&A and we can return to some of the questions that are in the text chat. I'm just copying them. So James, do you want to introduce the next speaker?
Thank you. Yes. Our next speakers are Susie Macfarlane and Emily Tomlinson, and their paper is also with Megan, but I think it will be Susie and Emily speaking on empowering staff and students through generative AI critical literacy, a course-wide approach. Thank you.
Thanks so much, James. Hi, everyone. My name's Susie Macfarlane. I'm Associate Professor in Learning Futures with Deakin University, and I lead a team supporting innovation in curriculum and assessment with course teams across the Faculty of Health. So we're kind of like a central teaching learning team, but we're embedded in the faculty. And I'm co-presenting today with Dr. Emily Tomlinson. Emily's a Senior Lecturer and Deputy Director of Undergraduate Studies in the Bachelor of Nursing. And our colleague Megan Dennis, who's unable to be here today, played a key role in this project and in the work behind it. So thank you for the invitation to share this work, and thanks everyone for coming along. We look forward to hearing your thoughts and work in this space as well, and we're very much looking forward to joining colleagues at my first AHE conference in Manchester in June. In this presentation, Emily and I will outline our pilot of a course-wide approach to embedding students' critical, ethical and responsible use of AI in curriculum assessment. And I'll just start off by setting the institutional and project context. With the rise of Gen AI in late 2022, with ChatGPT and so on, like many universities, Deakin adopted an empowering approach to Gen AI, encouraging course teams to develop staff and students' Gen AI knowledge and skills. Easier said than done, but there has been a great deal of activity over the last 18 months or so, with governance structures and policy changes in place, many networks and communities of practice established, webinars and conversations with our wonderful colleagues, research colleagues in Cradle and many other researchers around the world, and engagement with the TEXA principles, our higher education governance in Australia, as well as communications and guidelines for staff and students, which evolved over time with the changes that we're all seeing. And the assessment policy changes have enabled each unit chair to determine how their students are to engage with or use or not use Gen AI. And this provides individual academics with agency and choice, but also enormous responsibility. And at Deakin, a unit is a subject and a course is a program. So my team supports innovation across the faculty, and we work closely with the Associate Dean Teaching and Learning, Professor Lynn Riddell, to develop strategic initiatives and responses to sector change. So with the rise of Gen AI in late 2022, we employed Megan as a project officer and research fellow and formed a community of practice for teaching and learning leadership and staff in the Faculty of Health. We also invited Gen AI researchers and colleagues from central teams such as Learning Futures and the library to help us navigate and understand the implications of Gen AI for our courses. Across 2023, we held community of practice meetings every 2 weeks to build a learning network and to build that trust that happens when you meet frequently, and to together understand Gen AI capabilities as well as the limitations and risks. We shared assessment exemplars, shared resources from other universities and institutions around the world, and held informal peer conversations as well. And there's currently 180 members or so in the community of practice. And Megan and I also really strongly engaged with schools and course teams across the faculty. We delivered 24 presentations last year, I think we're up to 8 this year, and workshops where we held conversations, and these shifted in focus across the year, beginning with awareness raising, just showing people what these tools can do, moving into coming to terms with the implications for assessment in higher education, and then later on into how we respond, in how we think about assessment and design assessment. Megan and I undertook considerable research attending the TEXA Cradle webinars and others across the sector. We tested many Gen AI tools and met with other colleagues doing similar work. And we felt it was really important to develop a thorough knowledge of the capabilities, the ethical concerns, and the range of arguments and views in the literature and the higher education sector. And by mid-2023, we felt prepared to take on the next steps in co-designing curriculum assessments that respond to Gen AI, and reflecting on Philip's earlier comments about the power of metaphor. In a way, we tried to develop our knowledge so we rely less on metaphor. We always use it, of course, in language, but to be really aware when we're using it and aware of our knowledge gaps, so that we're trying to present the tools as themselves and platforms and products as themselves, rather than to lay too much over the top, and allow the colleagues we're working with to really generate their own knowledge and perspectives. And we also recognise the complexity of Gen AI and the importance of exploring the implications within the context of each discipline, which while we're a Faculty of Health, we have 60 courses, and many of them have really opposing complementary philosophies and practices. And so with that complexity, we adopted a collaborative and co-design approach, so that we didn't come up with the answers, we weren't prescriptive. We sat down with the course teams to listen to them and work collaboratively with them. Emily will outline that further. To reflect this course-wide approach, we developed this Gen AI curriculum framework that you can see here, and it's just a straw person, really just a bit of a starting point for discussion, but we're happy to share that if that's useful. And the framework's not prescriptive, but it just takes a view about recommending students develop their academic skills in first year and critique, but don't necessarily use Gen AI. As generally first year students in undergrad may not have mastered their discipline knowledge or skills sufficiently to evaluate Gen AI outputs, we felt. With second year, the framework suggests guiding students through critiquing AI limitations, risks, affordances for their academic work, their studies, and developing their evaluative judgment. And perhaps in third year, students can explore the applications of Gen AI in their discipline or profession and begin to critically evaluate specific features and tools. So why a course-wide approach? We adopted a course-wide approach for several reasons. Firstly, informed by recent research highlighting the limitations of a unit-based assessment task regime that may have little connection, progression, or integration across the course. And this can limit students' capacity to develop a coherent understanding of their overall learning goals across the program and their progress towards them. And in terms of why a course-wide approach to Gen AI, it was apparent that with the significance of the implications of Gen AI for higher ed and the speed of changes in this space, no one person or unit can adequately address these challenges in isolation. And it was also important to provide a safe space for teams to discuss and share their perspectives, build their understanding of Gen AI capabilities and the challenges for assessment, and also share and acknowledge the diversity of their views, from conscientious objectors right up to very highly critical and engaged users. And when TEXA released their framework that they developed with Cradle and through sector-wide consultation, we were pleased to see our assessment design and course-wide approach aligned well with these principles and propositions. Specifically, Proposition 2, assessment should emphasise a programmatic, systemic approach aligned with discipline and qualification values. And the principles also strongly aligned with the approach that we developed with Emily and the nursing and midwifery team. So I'll hand over to Emily to share this work.
Thanks very much, Susie. Hi, everyone. My name is Emily Tomlinson, and as Susie said, I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Nursing Midwifery, and I was lead on this project within our school, working closely with Susie and Megan to develop a course-wide approach in our Bachelor of Nursing and Combined Degrees courses. So I kind of wanted to start by firstly reflecting on some of the quotes from the team. So I worked with a few other colleagues in the school and I asked them why they wanted to get involved in doing this project. And so you can see by the quotes that they were all really keen to learn more about AI. And you know, we're thinking about things like what the ethical concerns were. Academic integrity was really top of everybody's mind, and also the relevance for the implications of AI for the future. So what would that look like in a nursing context in the future, and how would it benefit our students? So I wanted to sort of touch briefly on the process, and this is kind of how we worked through this course-wide approach. And as Susie mentioned, our university hasn't banned the use of AI, but wanted to work actively with staff to kind of engage them with the potential opportunities for AI. So what we wanted to do as part of this course-wide approach in the school was to build our students' ethical understanding, their capabilities, and critical AI literacy. And this included things like staff and student awareness of what the technology was, educating them about the limitations and biases of the technology, and being really explicit about when and where it was appropriate to use the tool, and then ourselves modelling that ethical and responsible critical use of AI in our own teaching. So our goal, kind of as I was thinking about that, was to really empower our students by giving them their own agency with engaging with AI. We wanted to help students understand that, in themselves, they have their own capacity and skills to use their own knowledge. And we wanted to give them the power to trust their own knowledge. you know, nurses, the students who, you know, complete our course become registered nurses. So registered nurses, it's really important that we rely on our own knowledge, and, you know, ultimately we're taking care of patients. So we want to make sure that our students, when they finish, are safe and effective care practitioners. So we wanted them to kind of learn about the ways, you know, new and interesting ways that you could use AI, and not immediately thinking that it could be used for, you know, cheating and writing assessments, for example. So in that process, we had an initial course consultation meeting with everybody in our undergraduate course to kind of get a sense of how everyone was feeling about it. We wanted to create this kind of safe space where people could share their ideas and talk about concerns and hesitations. And then following that meeting, we had identified a couple of unit chairs that might want to work with us to look at AI in their units. So we looked at a couple of units across their first, second and third years. So nursing is a 3-year degree. So we wanted to capture at least one unit across those 3 years. So we met with that group of unit chairs over a couple of months, and we were sharing ideas and brainstorming what we were going to do. And then from there, we kind of developed our plans and our activities and modifications that we were going to do for the assessments. And then we developed these kind of 3 scaffolded tiers that was really based on what Susie showed you earlier around the course-wide approach, and we tried to scaffold it into our curriculum. So this is the kind of 3 tiers that we developed for our plan across the course, and the units are kind of complementary to some of our clinical units. So we wanted to introduce these concepts really early on. So in a first year subject, which is the first semester of study, and it's a unit about evidence-based practice. So we thought it really fit well in there. So we wanted to encourage students to look at how they develop their academic literacy skills before using AI. So we started introducing them to the concepts of what AI was, and then got them to do some really basic interpretation and appraisal of outputs. We teach them how to paraphrase and do some kind of basic summarizing in that unit. So we got them to kind of appraise some of those things. And then, so by the second year, we want to get them to kind of build on some of that, and then have opportunities for more critical application. And then so having some more guided interaction with the AI during some seminar activities, and then giving them a chance to kind of practice actually having conversations with the AI by doing a role play. That took a little bit of playing here and there, but and might need some modification in the future, but it seems like it was a good kind of starting, I guess, activity. And then by third year, we wanted the students to aim to have AI as kind of like a learning partner or a tool in their learning. And we wanted students to think about how it can be helpful to support their learning, or a tool kind of adjacent to their learning. So in that third year, we guided them through an activity during the seminars again, which they were going to use as a set of interview questions for their assessment that they were doing for that unit. So we had some reflections from the team on that actual process of developing this kind of tiered approach and how we kind of came up with that. So I'll just share very quickly. That kind of course-wide collaborative approach was really helpful in that we felt supported. We enjoyed working together as a team to come up with ideas, and nobody was kind of left having to think of something to do by themselves. So we all kind of was a bit more confident in how we were approaching this problem. And so what they actually learned through the process, so myself and the other team members, was that, you know, AI is evolving really quickly, it's constantly changing, and together it was much easier for us to think about embracing those changes and creating some more learning opportunities for students so they can engage with AI ethically, and ensuring that, you know, in the long run that they're still providing safe and quality care for their patients when they graduate. So now that we have almost completed a semester, so they started in late March, and have most of those kind of AI activities that we developed have actually have actually been done. And so we have some early reflections from the team or from the staff who actually taught into those units about how the activities were implemented. So I've done a really quick and rough short survey with the staff, and done a really quick kind of piece together of some themes that we saw coming across. And we've got plans to expand on this a little bit and keep having conversations with the team about how to move it forward. So one of the themes, and just it's just from the staff, we haven't talked to students at the moment. So one of the things that they spoke about was that there was a diversity of student attitudes when they spoke about using AI in the class, in the seminars. So there was quite a mixed reaction. A lot of them had some reservations about academic integrity, and that some were really excited to use it, and some were quite kind of cautious about actually using it. So the next theme is around AI literacy. And as this is a new technology, there was some difficulties with both staff and students not really being confident in knowing how to actually use the technology. Some had never used it before, and some of our staff had never used it before. So it was quite a steep learning curve for students and staff to get, you know, to be able to use it. And another one was around their critical AI literacy. So this was more about students being able to identify the realization of the limits of AI, and the activities that we did kind of helped them to highlight that there was some limitations. It's not always accurate. It provided a good opportunity for like really good thought-provoking discussion around you know, when would be appropriate to use it. And it was a great opportunity for students to build skills around when might it be useful, and when we could actually use it in the future. Sorry. The next one was around the opportunity for student collaboration. So these activities really help to provide another platform. We have, you know, we do have student collaboration often in our seminars. A lot of the way that they're set up is that students do collaborate with each other to help with the learning, but it's sort of provided an extra level of engagement and a new kind of activity that students could then collaborate with and explore together. One issue though was that it did involve a lot of time investment. So I did say before that you know, it was kind of a steep learning curve for people, and that did require quite a bit of time investment in learning how to use it, and sometimes the time in the class to use it took away from the actual learning that we wanted them to have in that activity. And then the last theme that we kind of identified was that the students could get quite focused on the mechanics of how the ChatGPT or the AI was actually working. And like I said, it sort of had taken time away from focusing on what the actual learning outcomes are. So reflecting on that and needing to have an understanding that the AI is kind of adjacent to the learning. It's sort of a tool that helps with that, but we should use it to support students and making sure that they're still meeting the learning outcomes for the subject. So just in conclusion from my part is what we've actually learned from doing this process. So firstly, that the collaborative engagement and team approach has been really worthwhile from our point of view. Working alongside others was really valuable, with Susie and Megan having their experience and input. AI is really complex for one unit alone within our course to tackle, and so we wanted, it's better to have that collaborative approach across the course. I know initially a lot of team members in our undergraduate curriculum were kind of worried that they would have to think about how they would address AI in their own specific unit, but I think sort of taking that away and looking at it as a more umbrella approach across the course really kind of gave them the space to not worry about it so much in theirs. Also, the next point around student learning. So again, students should focus on how students learn and encourage having that AI as a small part of the activity to maybe start the conversation, using part of it, keeping activities short with the AI, but ensuring that they're still learning, but still able to engage with it and see how it could work. And then lastly, that it requires continual development through feedback. So we're going to, like I said, continually review this and then seek opinions of the staff who taught it and students, and continually develop and potentially open it up to different areas and where it could fit within the course as well. So that's all from me. I'll pass you back to Susie for the last couple of slides.
Thanks, Emily. And just briefly, our next steps, Deakin's working on an overall framework to give a little bit more consistent guidance. I know many universities have done this work and we're doing that now as well. We're expanding this course-wide approach in 4 further courses in our faculty with an associated research project, which is exciting. And we're also developing our own capacity in understanding Gen AI research tools such as Elicit and Research Rabbit, and the implications of the models that you can download now onto your own machine, like from Hugging Face, and the implications for personalised models that will allow us to avoid many of the problems of sharing data with these big, powerful companies that we don't know what they'd do with it. So there's a lot to keep learning, but hope that was interesting and look forward to any further questions. Thanks, Matthew.
Sorry. Yep, I was just typing a comment of myself. Right, let's go back to the top. Lorraine was asking about students who refuse to use AI, but I think you may have answered that one already, so I'll move on. Yeah, so how will the fact that all children will have experience of generative AI before coming to higher ed? So if we're thinking about the students who are landing in our institutions this year and probably next year, they will have already had it. So how does that then impact the 3-year curriculum plan?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll have a go and then Emily can jump in.
That was from
and
Mike.
Joe.
Oh, yeah.
Joe's helped out there too in your response, Joe. Joe's pointed out that not all students come straight from school. I think at Deakin it's about 50%. But nevertheless, I think the use of Gen AI has particular relevance in the context of the academic skills in higher education, and the stakes are very high in health courses where we need to graduate professionals who are very capable of maintaining their own knowledge and their evaluative judgment. But I'm sure we will adapt this every year. Every one of those 24 presentations that I did changed every week as we grappled with the next models that were coming out and the next features, and the changes in students. In 1 year, we've seen 25% of students use Gen AI. Then the middle of the year, the Guardian reported 50% in a study in the UK, and now we're hearing 75%. So, and they're embedded in tools and invisible at times that it's even there. So, yeah, but we still think that understanding these limitations and capabilities and understanding how the models work and that they're not search tools, it's not knowledge, it's not facts, it's not truth, it is a model that produces the probability of the next most likely word. And there's a lot of human responsibility there in critiquing the outputs that we think we still need to work with our students on understanding. Did you want to add anything there, Emily?
I just wanted to add that, kind of like I mentioned at the end, that we will be doing continual development of this, and we kind of saw it this year already, that a lot of the third years who were doing probably the more complex engagement with AI had a lot of trouble doing it because they didn't have the earlier sort of introduction to it. So we do know that that is going to shift as more and more people start using it, and that's going to change. So we will kind of just constantly be watching it and seeing whether it's at the right level for the students, and potentially adding it into different elements, and yeah, looking at it from more of a health-wide perspective in terms of how it's used in healthcare organisations and in the system. We kind of have to be a little bit ahead, try and be anyway, of what's actually happening out in health services, because we want to send our nurses out who are potentially going to be working in the system for 20, 30 years, to have some of those initial skills anyway. But yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, sorry, I'm going to get back to my other window. Right. I think that is similar. So Kelly Galvin was asking, I really resonate with this tiered approach. I'm also left wondering if there is enough of a personalised approach in terms of when individuals in a cohort are ready for the different skills in the tiers. For instance, is there a case for encouraging developing skills using AI as a collaborator through the years rather than emphasis in the later undergraduate, i.e., do we, what's the timing? Should we be just teaching the students those evaluative judgment, critical skills much earlier in the piece with the AI tools?
I think that's a great question, and what we decided to do is just hold back on that in first year, partly as we each and our course team members, our teachers, develop their own capability, and perhaps as was pointed out, as students' capabilities are high when they come in, we might change that. But we felt, I used the metaphor, mindfully, of using a Porsche or a Ferrari to cross the road. For a first-year student to use Gen AI,
Yep.
I feel I've even got to the point now where I feel that really it should be in the hands of an expert, that I shouldn't use Gen AI tools in areas that I don't have expertise in, when it's about knowledge production or writing where people are going to read it. So we feel that was an okay approach this year, but yes, I'm sure that will change over time.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like Susie said, it was kind of, and this was a little bit of a pilot trial as well, seeing what worked, what didn't, and I guess kind of trying to meet the students where they are, and then just engaging with that and trying to adjust it as maybe things change. So yeah, we'll definitely be looking at it, and there's definitely some students who had already used it and had kind of, taken on that initiative for themselves and used it. So yeah, we were trying to, I guess, meet the whole cohort in terms of what we've got, and I don't think we said this, but we've got over 3,000 nursing students in our course over our campuses and over the 3 years. So it can be quite hard to do a very personalised approach. Yeah, but we try and do our best in in the seminars where we have more of a one-on-one kind of engagement with the students.
Okay, thank you. There are some questions in the text chat that have come through more recently, but we are at 2 minutes before the hour, which means we will need to formally close off. However, if people are willing to stick around to keep the conversations going, I'm most open to that idea. So before that happens, I know some people will need to leave because they've booked an hour into their calendar, as you'd expect. So the next slide just outlines the next session for Transforming Assessment. And not surprisingly, generative AI is featuring quite strongly, given, well, everybody's talking about it. This one's a bit interesting. The impact of deep fakes and synthetic media on assessment integrity and what we can do about it is going to be the topic of discussion on the 5th of June. The registration page is now live, so if you go to transformingassessment.com, you'll be able to see it on the right-hand side. So with that, do we have any other questions that people would like to ask? You're welcome to put them into the text chat, and we will continue the session.
There was a great question about anxiety, and I think from Leanne, and I think what we've tried to do, I don't think we emphasised enough in this presentation, but to make every conversation a safe and respectful conversation, recognising the value of everyone's perspectives, no matter what it was, and we put that up front straight away. So I think that's really important. Otherwise, students are just going to hide their use of it, and staff are going to be terrified. So we took a real human first approach in a lot of ways, not just human before Gen AI, but human before tasks and outcomes. We just wanted to bring together people in a way where they felt safe to share all of their views, because this, I feel, is disrupted the role of teachers, you know, more significantly than anything else in the last couple of 100 years, perhaps, other than the internet. So it's a huge time, I think, for us to be supportive of each other.
Thanks, Susie. I really agree with that. And I think it's, you know, it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes, you know, a massive community to face, I guess, the raising of the Gen AI in our context. I think yeah, I agree. There's going to be massive changes, and being humanistic about things, you know, is certainly a good space to be. I did make I mean, there's been, if you look on places like LinkedIn and whatever, there's conversations, Kelly Matthews at UQ, etc., talking about the language we use when we're talking about generative AI and being careful about whether we anthropomorphize the technology or not. Yeah, so I think there's a lot of water to run under this bridge yet. So yeah. Any other questions that are floating around? Just scrolling up through the chat to see if I can find any more.
I'd love to hear if anyone's using any of the research tools at the moment, because I think that'll reach academics in a different way if they're, through their identity as researchers, if they can see the power and also, you know, some of the limitations. I did data extraction from 79 papers in 3 hours last weekend.
Yes,
80 to 90% accurate.
Yeah, this is an interesting, you know, there are it's almost a generalized simulator to some extent. So I think it might have been Ethan Mollick who referred to it as a general simulator. So yes, it produces words, but you know, these things have been put to all sorts of different uses, and it's going to be interesting to see whether all these different uses are indeed valid uses or whether they're just pretending. You know, if we think about the fundamentals, as you said, generative AI for text is a words guessing engine, not a database of facts. What does that mean for, you know, utilizing it in the research context or utilizing it in the student assessment context? So yeah.
Yes, and yet the accuracy approximates or outperforms human extraction. But yeah, but you're right. It's it doesn't understand the. Well, I think we're getting to that point where it's debatable. Where the semantic links are so strong that it might be approximating understanding now.
Yeah, I think that debate's going to go on for a bit.
Yeah.
We also got to remember the models are going to get better from here on out too. So,
yeah,
you know, every month there's a new invention in this space, and it's crossing over into all sorts of generative AI. Is not just text, videos, audio, images, also coming along. It's going to have profound impacts on society in general, I think. But yeah. Okay, folks, we might wrap it up here. I'm sure our speakers would love to go and eat their dinner or their breakfast if you're in the UK. So thank you very much, folks. Hopefully we'll see you back again for the next round of the Generative AI saga in assessment. So thanks very much. I'm just going to stop.